that my congressional delegation understands so clearly. We could build back if we pass Build It Back. That is how we build America back. And scale up a nationwide response to this public health crisis that is gun violence. That's why we're here today, to bring together our federal, state, and city partners in common cause. We're going to stop gun trafficking from coming into our city, get illegal guns off the streets, and lock up those who carry them, and make sure that they don't leave prison or jails without the opportunities they need so they don't have a revolving door of crime in our city and country. We're going to provide funding for cities and states to put more police officers in the places we need them, invest in community violence prevention and intervention programs, and change our laws to prevent crime and save lives, and do it in a way that we can disagree without being disagreeable, because we are in this fight together. We're going to break and destroy the iron pipeline that allows southern states in this country to produce weapons that end up on the streets and take the lives of our police officers, Mora and Rivera. And I want to, again, take my hat off to Officer Summit, who protected countless numbers of New Yorkers and responding police officers by taking the appropriate action to end the threat that we were facing. We're going to dam those rivers of violence and address the sources of those violence. It's about more than fighting crime. As Congressman Velasquez reminds us all the time, it's about rebuilding our society. It's not just locking people up. It's about picking them up and giving them the opportunity to do so. That is why the American people elected Joe Biden to lead them. That is why we're willing to follow that leadership. And that is why I'm proud to be here today among the men and women who wore that same uniform that I wore, to stand shoulder to shoulder with the president. And we want to get stuff done. That's the administration of the Biden's administration and the Adams administration, to get stuff done for the American people. And Mr. President, Eric Adams is reporting for duty and ready to serve.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to our governor.
Thank you, Mr. President, for participating here today. This is on. Is that on? I don't think it's on. All right. Is that on? Yep. Okay, good. Can you hear me now? All right. All right. Mr. President, life is all about showing up. On a day when you had to deal with an international incident where the rest of the country was riveted on the news that was coming out of the White House, you still found the time to show up. And to me, that is a commitment that we'll not take for granted. It's more than just words. It's a sign of your desire to really be a partner with all of us, as I am with the Mayor of New York and with our district attorneys and the New York State Police and the NYPD, who I said today, it is so refreshing not to see you sitting there with tears in our eyes in St. Patrick's Cathedral, as we have been doing far too often. So, Commissioner, I want to thank you for leading an incredible team. I'm proud of my team at the state level. We also have other state partners. We have our great Attorney General. Letitia James is here. Mr. Attorney General, thank you. We think you're doing a great job for the country. We've got the all-star right here in our own state as well as all the elected officials who I had the privilege of serving with in Congress a decade ago. This is the team that has to be activated, because we cannot wait a single day longer. Because the challenge that lies before us, it's not unique to New York State, it is not unique to this city, it is an American crisis. But what we're doing here in the state of New York and in the city of New York can be used as a model for other parts of our country to show them what real collaboration looks like. I've been in this business a long time, and I've seen that people get into silos. Federal government's going to handle this case, the prosecutors over here, and the local government and district attorneys are over here, and the state government has a different role. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing a unification of purpose that has been missing. And the ones who ought to be afraid of that are those who dare violate the laws that are in place to protect the people of our cities and our state. But also, there are people who are hurting in this community. We saw an incredible increase in violence immediately following the pandemic. It appears to me the human condition was very frail. We have people who've succumbed to suicide, substance abuse, domestic violence, and even, yes, acquiring a gun on the streets for $1,200 and using it against one of their fellow men or women. We have to figure out the root causes here. And that is why in my budget, I not only tripled the amount of money to support our law enforcement activities and community policing, but triple the amount of money being spent on the exact kind of programs we're all talking about here, is figuring out what is happening when young people are faced with that decision that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Do I stay on the straight and narrow, or do I succumb to the streets? Where am I going to find my family? We need to provide that family and let them know that there are jobs and opportunities and adults who care about them, and the violence disruptors, and I've seen them in action so many times. Many of them are former gang members. They're the ones who can speak to them in a way that no one else can. So we're continuing to support that. And Mr. President, I want to thank you for the American Recovery Plan dollars. We are spending them on many important causes, but we are dedicating many of them, as you've suggested, to dealing with both sides of the equation. The very human side, where we need to be dealing with the resources and support for these people, but also those who cross the line, deal with that and make sure our law enforcement have the resources. With respect to ghost guns, I signed a law just a few months ago that banned them in the state of New York. And as a series of reforms, we also banned the component parts. And we named it after an individual whose name I'm going to say right now, and that is Scott J. Beagle. He is the brave teacher in that school in Parkland where our children were slaughtered. His family is from Long Island. We named it after him, and his mother was there and gave me this hug and said, "We'll never forget Scott, will we?" And I said, "Never, never, ever." Just as we'll remember other victims, the men and women like Officer Rivera and more, who so proudly wear those uniforms, to hear from their families what it meant to them to put on that uniform every day. It was so impactful and powerful to hear their words. We have to fight to protect them as well. So, Mr. President, we're going to find all the smart ways to double down on this. The task force that you referenced has already worked together collaboratively. 9 states, in addition to the state police, NYPD, your own ATF is represented, Boston Police Department. These counties and states have come together like never before with one purpose: is to stop the flow of guns over our borders, because, yes, as governor, I'm going to help my mayors, and I have mayors all over the state who need my help. But my job is to protect those borders, because 80% of guns in this state are coming from other states illegally. So I'm watching those borders. Let everybody be aware, we are checking. We're out there, we're checking the people who are putting guns in their trunks in gun shows in Pennsylvania, heading north and ending up in Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island. It's going to stop right now. That is the message. We have the resources, we have the will, we have the desire to get this done, because our citizens are calling on us to protect them so they can feel safe once again in this great city and this incredible state. So, Mr. President, thank you for your time. You being here today sends a powerful message, and we do not forget that you never forgot us at a time when we needed your support the most. And with that, I'd like to introduce an incredible partner that we have representing us, the entire state in Washington, D.C., and that is our Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your leadership and your determination to take this scourge of gun violence head on. It really does matter. I want to recognize all my state partners who are sitting here with me, our delegation in Congress, as well as our DAs and our Attorney General. I want to thank each of you for being here. New York has just lost 2 officers who were shot and killed in the line of duty. Detective Wilbert Mora's funeral was yesterday. He was only 27. Last week, I attended the funeral of Detective Jason Rivera, who was only 22. They had their whole lives ahead of them. After that, I stood with Jennifer Pryor, a mom who I first met in 2009. Her brilliant, beautiful daughter, Nyasia, was an honor roll student and on the cheerleading squad. One night, when Nyasia was out with her friends celebrating their recent graduation, a stray bullet hit her in the head and killed her instantly. I went to Brooklyn. I met her family. I met her classmates. Losing a child that young is really hard. It's hard for the community, and it's hard for everyone. As a mom of 2 young boys who are about that age right now, I can't imagine the horror or the pain that a parent lives through to keep going forward every day. And as a senator, I made a commitment that we would take action and do what we could on the federal level to stop the senseless gun violence in our cities, in our state, in our country. Now, New York is not unique, but it does have a particular problem. Almost 90% of the guns used in crimes in our city are trafficked guns, just as the governor said. So our approach to combating gun violence has to include dealing with these trafficked weapons. Right now, there's literally no federal law that makes it illegal to cross a state line with a trunk full of guns, get on a bus with a bag full of guns, get in your car and drive up the Iron Pipeline and sell them directly out of the back of a truck into the arms of criminals in our city. We have to change that. It's really pretty simple. We have to keep these illegal guns off of our streets, out of the hands of those who could not buy them legally. We have to work hand in glove across federal, state, and local government lines. We have to pass the common sense gun reforms that the president talked about, that our mayor wants, that our attorney general fights for. We have strong partners here. I believe between all of us here today, we can do this. The bill that many of us have been working on in Washington is called the Hadiyah Pendleton and Nyasia Pryor Yard Gun Trafficking and Crime Prevention Act, which would establish gun trafficking as a federal crime and go upstream to address all responsible parties: the traffickers buying the guns and transporting them across state lines, the gun dealers who knowingly facilitate or recklessly disregard the warning signs of gun trafficking, and the kingpins and organizers who plan the trafficking. When similar legislation was brought up in 2013 for a vote, it got 58 votes. You know, in the Senate we have to get 60. It was the closest we got to any common sense gun reform. This is a gun that this is a bill that Commissioner Kelly helped me write. And so I know with our new police commissioner, and I know with our governor and our mayor, and with our president, we can get this done this year. We cannot have more stories of 4-year-olds dying on park benches in Brooklyn. We cannot have more stories of moms and their movement speaking out, begging leaders to do what's right. We can do this, and we will. Now I'd like to introduce Hakeem Jeffries.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, to President Biden, Mayor Adams, Governor Hochul, General Garland, Commissioner Sewell, all my colleagues in government, men and women of the NYPD. President Biden, thank you for your leadership, your partnership, for your presence here in New York City. We believe the greatest city in the world, with apologies to Wilmington, Delaware. But every great city, of course, has challenges, and the stunning rise in gun violence is a major challenge for us to address. But we recognize, as you have indicated, it's a national challenge. Think about the dynamic that we are confronting here in America. We have 4% of the world's population, but 40% of the world's guns. That means there are more than 300 million guns circulating in the United States of America. And many of those guns, such as the one used to strike down 2 heroes, Detective Rivera and Detective Mora, are weapons of war. They're not used to hunt deer, they're used to hunt human beings. That's not acceptable. Many of those guns too easily fall into the hands of violent individuals in far too many communities, such as many that I represent in central Brooklyn and across America. That's not acceptable, and far too many of those guns are illegally trafficked from other places into this great metropolis. That's not acceptable. So it's an all-hands-on-deck approach that will require tremendous leadership, as is being provided by our president, our governor, and our mayor, and our congressional delegation at all levels of government, city, state, and federal. And the congressional delegation in the House, Representatives Velasquez, Nadler, Espaillat, Meng, Swazi, and others, we stand ready to partner with you to get done what needs to happen to deal with this gun violence scourge with the fierce urgency of now, to make sure that we balance the interests of public safety and that important American principle of liberty and justice for all, and invest in communities that have traditionally been left behind to create opportunity in every single zip code. A tough moment for us in the city, but we're a resilient community, a resilient city, a resilient country. You can knock us down, but never knock us out, and together we will get this done. Thank you for your leadership, Mr. President. I now yield to my good friend, whose district we are in, here in Lower Manhattan, Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez.
Well, I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Mr. President, it is such an honor, and it is so comforting to the men and women in uniform, to the mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters who have suffered because of gun violence in our country, to the Attorney General Garland, Governor Hochul, and Mayor Adams. Thank you for making it possible, but also in recognizing that it takes all of us working together. To my New York congressional delegation, I want to recognize the incredible role that we have played in working together with this administration to make sure that we secure the resources, not only to deal with gun violence in our country, but to tackle the issue of the pandemic, to provide relief assistance to small businesses in our country. And I am proud that we have been able to get this economy growing again, that because of the commitment and vision of President Biden. Since the start of the pandemic, gun violence in our city has surged to levels not seen in a decade. Shootings are up by 166% here in New York City. Across the U.S., over 20,000 people were killed by gun violence last year. Black and brown communities, we are victims of gun violence. It takes us also, because we are on the ground. We know what works and what doesn't work. We got the expertise, and we need to use all those grassroots community organizations who understand the dynamics that play into gun violence in our country. So these statistics are not just numbers. Each represents a lost member of our communities. We must recognize that mobilizing community-based resources, job opportunities, and early intervention are key to protecting our youth from gun violence. We must also, once and for all, crack down on the iron pipeline of illegal guns being funneled into states like New York. This is just not a public safety issue, but one that requires partnerships with healthcare institutions, schools, job-creating programs, churches, as Hakeem Jeffrey just said. We are all hands on deck. This is how we're going to tackle this issue. And I want to recognize Los Sures anti-violence program in North Brooklyn, working with NYCHA, New York City Housing Public Authority, and they are working to stem the gun violence issue in public housing. They have been successful. It is proven. It can work. Let's do it. Thank you. And it's my honor to introduce the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chairman Jerry Nadler. You have it there.
Well, thank you very much. I obviously agree with everything that's been said, and I certainly thank the President for his support for the actions he's taking to bring money to New York, for his support of legislation in order to solve this problem. You know, it is said that by the NRA, and I remember in 2004 when we passed, when a Republican Congress passed that bill to exempt gun manufacturers from lawsuits because they were being sued on the model of the tobacco companies who had been sued for falsifying the information about the toxicity of their product. And they managed to pass this legislation, which is still on the books. And the President, who was then a senator, was instrumental in 1994 in getting the assault weapons ban passed. But it was a 10-year bill, and it was allowed to expire in 2004, and I wish we could get it back. The legislation that we have passed in Congress is wholly inadequate. Now, the Judiciary Committee has passed, the House has passed 2 bills, H.R. 8, which requires a background check on every gun or transfer with limited exceptions, such as family members. We passed the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021 last March, which addresses the Charleston loophole in background check procedures. This loophole is that when an individual attempts to purchase a firearm from a licensed dealer, the FBI has 3 days to complete a background check, and if the background check isn't completed in 3 days, he gets the gun, even if the background check would come back in 4 or 5 days and say that this person is a dangerous person to have the gun. So we passed the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021, which addresses this deficiency by providing the FBI additional time to complete background checks, gives notice to the FBI about which cases need to be prioritized for review. And the Judiciary Committee, in October of last year, only a few months ago, reported favorably out of committee Lucy McBath's bill, red flag bill, which would create a federal extreme risk, or red flag law, as we call it, that would prevent firearms from being accessible to those who are a danger to themselves and others. The bill would create procedures for federal courts to issue extreme risk protection orders to prohibit a person from purchasing, possessing, or receiving a firearm or ammunition. Under the bill, a family or household member or a law enforcement officer can petition the court for an extreme risk protection order with respect to an individual who poses a risk to themselves or others. The bill also adds people who are subject to an extreme risk protection order to the categories of persons prohibited from purchasing, shipping, transporting, possessing, or receiving a firearm or ammunition under federal law. Now, in the last Congress, in the 116th Congress, the Senate companion to this bill was introduced by Lindsey Graham. The concept was championed by none other than President Trump in a series of 2019 statements on mass shootings. Senator Graham has not reintroduced the bill yet in the 117th Congress, but we're talking to him. Leadership has expressed support. Given its bipartisan origins and outreach by Representative McBath and others, by committee staff, the bill, we hope, will find Republican support of the House floor, and I believe that this bill is the best hope for legislative action on gun violence in what remains of this Congress. Now, of course, this is wholly inadequate, and that's why everything the President is talking about and the Attorney General is talking about doing by executive order, which should be law, but we haven't been able to make it law, should be done by executive order, and hopefully, eventually by law.
Thank you so much, the entire congressional delegation. We want to now, I know the police commissioner has to depart to go to the walkout for one of the officers that was shot a few nights ago. Police commissioner, if you want to say a few comments, and then we'll turn it over to the task force to give a presentation of what they're doing every day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. President and Attorney General Garland, thank you so much for coming to witness firsthand what the NYPD and our law enforcement partners are doing to end the proliferation of illegal guns and shootings in New York City. We know across the cities and major areas in this country they're experiencing an uptick in violence, a growing number of shootings, and guns on their streets, and New York City has not been immune. Experts will likely debate this for years, but we do not have years. There are too many people carrying guns who are not afraid to use them. Our officers are out there engaging, and they are doing what literally is the most dangerous thing a police officer can do. They are taking guns out of the hands of criminals on our streets, and our officers are paying a heavy price for it. It cannot be overstated that since the beginning of the year, we have had 6 of our own officers shot, and tragically 2 of them killed. And Mr. President and Attorney General Garland, I want to thank you for your outpouring of support and your condolences during this time, during the loss of our members. It's sincerely appreciated. In fact, again, as the mayor said, we have to excuse ourselves because a little bit of good news, one of our officers is being released from the hospital today, so we're going to head over there. Despite a record number of gun arrests and seizures by the police, the communities and our citizens continue to pay a horrific price. We've seen our citizens suffer from this violence. Bystanders, unintended targets, babies, and people simply trying to do their jobs. We know this violence is not acceptable against our citizens or our police officers, and we know that it has to be stopped. And we know that it starts here in the NYPD with action. That is why the Gun Violence Strategies Partnership was started. What you are seeing here today, Mr. President, is every component of law enforcement in New York literally at the table. This morning, we're going to do what this group does every day. We're going to go over the shootings, the suspects, the guns, the shell casings, the facts to connect the dots. They will go around the table. We're going to use every tool, talent, and resource available through every agency to focus on the very few who are responsible for the largest number of shootings in our city. And we intend to use every legal tool at our disposal to remove them from our communities. This is about the life of a city, but it's also about the lives of the people who make up this city. And together, with this partnership, we know that we will not fail. It's an extraordinary meeting. I've been a part of it. These are truly professionals. And I want to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Chauncey Parker, who's basically like the quarterback of this team.
Before that, you do that, Deputy Commissioner, since this is sensitive information, I think at this time we're going to ask the press to depart because this is sensitive information that is shared. And so if personnel could help us clear the room.